Welcome to Awake.
I see you have some fishing rods back there as well, maybe.
I do have fishing rods, yeah.
That's sweet, man.
Yeah, I haven't I'm just picking that back up too. When I was like 13, I wanted to be a professional fisherman.
Really?
Yeah. I
Huh.
didn't pursue that, but um I grew up here in Minnesota. I'm from Wisconsin, and so
Okay.
everybody around here fishes and hunts. And yeah, I just got really into fishing when I was like 12, 13 years old. Like all I would ask for Christmas was fishing lures and all
That's
sorts of
awesome.
stuff. So yeah, I would watch like fishing shows on TV.
Of which there are many really good ones, by the way,
Hmm.
like
Babe
River
Winkleman.
Monsters.
Yeah.
You kidding me? Like it's the best TV I've seen ever, maybe.
Yeah. But then I kind of got into skateboarding and music and felt like fishing wasn't cool anymore.
Yeah.
But now
Yeah.
I'm interested in fishing again, more for just acquiring food than sport or anything.
And now the two U's are synthesized into
Ex-
one.
Exactly. Yeah.
I
I
love
feel
it.
like
That's
I'm
so
being interviewed right now.
yeah, so tell me. No, no, I can tell you about when I was a kid. I was very into freshwater aquarium. So I was kind of more into keeping them alive than you, but it
Yeah.
was kind of different, more ornamental interest. So
You never scooped them out and fried them up?
no, are you kidding me?
I'm
No, it
just
was
kidding.
like a big sad. I just remember, gosh, it was so stressful. Very stressful
Did you
keeping
ever
them.
have one jump out of the tank?
Never. We had all of the precautions up to make sure no such thing would happen.
We had that happen twice. Once with a piranha, actually.
No way.
Yeah.
You just bounced?
Well, we just couldn't find like we had I think two or three piranhas and one of them was gone and we're like, where the heck did that thing go? Like we had no idea. And then one day my brother, this is when we were young, my brother like put his hand behind his bed for some reason and he felt something weird and there was a little dried out piranha behind his bed.
Oh,
But then
gosh.
another time we had this big ass fish. I can't remember what kind of fish it was. It was huge and it would like for some reason this is gonna sound like we're terrible fish owners, which we probably were, I don't know. But he would like bang his head against the aquarium for some reason.
Oh, poor guy.
And so he had like this scarring on his head and his name was Oscar, I think. And then we went out to eat one night and came home and he was on the living room floor. He had somehow got jumped out of the aquarium. But then we were able to. He was all right. We put him in some water, and he came back, and
And then
he was like indestructible. He lived for quite a while longer.
I think it might have been an Oscar fish, maybe.
That's probably what it was.
Oscar
Yeah.
the Oscar, if I had to guess.
No, you're probably right. They're
Yeah.
pretty big
Yeah.
fish. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, all right. A toast to our deceased animal friends.
Yeah.
Um,
So, how are you doing?
I think I'm good. Yeah, I just rescued an orchid from. Here, if you want to take a look at him, I just rescued an orchid from
Nice.
plant shop. My first orchid. I'm doing pretty well. I mean, I had a bit of a low week. It's like it would be weird if we didn't, I
Yeah.
guess. I think I'm on week 5 of quarantine, maybe or
Mm.
longer. I don't know. Pretty good. Yeah.
Do you have roommates or anything?
Well, I'm actually my situation is kind of funny. For years now, I've been living most of the year in Peru,
Mm.
and I've been living and working in the Peruvian Amazon. And then obviously with the situation, things are getting pretty dodgy where I was located, so I needed to kind of escape.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I'm in the States. I'm in upstate New York with my parents right now.
That's
So.
nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So safe, happy, fed, can't complain really.
You
But
live in the city, when you're not in the Amazon, is that right?
yeah, yeah. Although, I mean, I've been on tour with my friend Shane Moss,
Yeah.
and we've been doing this psychedelic stand-up science show called Head Talks. So we had a 50 city tour planned and mapped out this year.
Mm.
And I think we'd gotten through almost 20 shows. So I really was not, I didn't even, I was like, why would I even pay rent for a place if I'm going to be on
Yeah.
the road all the time? So, this is a unique situation, but it's all good.
Well, that seemed like it kind of worked out nice. I imagine that would kind of suck to be stuck in New York City right now, especially if
Yeah.
you live alone and whatever else.
Yeah. 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 Thinking of all those people out there. Yeah.
Yeah, not fun. I live in Minneapolis, which is like not a huge city.
Yeah.
But even that, I don't really enjoy being in the city too much right now, and I'm actually going to be moving to the country pretty soon here, which is
You
exciting.
are. That's
Hmm.
awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. That's
Yeah, I'm
great.
looking forward to it. Have some space to grow some food and just like hang out outside all the time, you know?
Love it. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah.
So how did you get into like actually living in the Amazon?
How did I get into living in the
Well,
Amazon?
maybe go back to like I'm just curious about your whole path through like how'd you get interested in all the stuff you like got educated for, like
Mm-hmm.
how did that
Mm-hmm.
path kind of come
Mm-hmm.
together?
How did it come together? I mean, yeah, it's only now that I'm feeling it as something that came together, but I think for many years it felt like a bunch of fractured kind of interests. But I mean, I was born and raised in New York City, and I've always been, I mean, looking back, I think I was always on some sort of a quest to find meaning, like many other people in the world,
Hmm.
obviously. But I felt specifically that I was living in some sort of a vacuum of sense. Like I'd grown up in a hyper metropolitan environment, and everyone went on to go work in finance or in media or whatever. And I just wasn't really satisfied with like what was out there. The stories we were being told about the meaning of life, our relationship to the natural world, what is our purpose as humans. And so since I was young, I was really starting to ask those questions. And I actually began my professional career as an actress, as a teen actor. And I loved acting because it was in a sense it's kind of a shamanic art, right? It is this act of conveying the ineffable, translating the eternal in a temporal space, and I loved that. But I ended up getting funneled into the professional acting circuit, which very quickly kind of squelched my fire for that. And then one thing led to another, and I guess I usually put a stake in the time around Occupy Wall Street, near Zuccotti Park when I guess I was a freshman in college. Um, and there were Native American elders there who were praying. And I found it so interesting to be praying at a protest, and of course, I started having some conversations with them. And I learned later that they had relationships with plants. And not only did they have like house plants and gardening plants, but these plants were actually teachers for them. And they were central sacraments that basically their entire worldview pivoted from upon. So from there, I just became super interested in the relationships between plants and people and different cultures. And because it was at a really opportune time in my personal and academic development, I was a freshman in college, have to declare a major. And so I started bopping around, kind of browsing around for things to study. And I found basically that religious studies and anthropology were the best suited for me to actually like really pursue that. So I've from there on out, I've had both an academic relationship with these things and a personal relationship with these things and these traditions. So yeah.
That's pretty
And
fascinating.
yeah.
So that was a pretty key encounter there. I mean, because you weren't really that interested in like plants or stuff like that before you met the Native American.
I mean, it's funny because I guess we humans, speaking for myself, maybe
Hmm.
you can create autobiographical stories that may not necessarily have been as they actually were, right? Like
Sure.
I've answered this question several times, and every time I find myself like saying new things and exploring new ways to look at it. I don't think as a kid I was ever particularly interested in plants. I think as I've gotten older, I've become more and more like almost morbidly fascinated by them.
Mm,
And I think to be completely honest with you, at some point, I think I just said, plants are really cool.
hmm.
And then I didn't know anything about them, but I just wanted to start reading and studying. And then from there on, it just kind of unfolded. But I never had some kind of like a spiritual connection to plants as a kid.
Yeah.
It wasn't quite like that.
Yeah, I haven't either, but just within the last like year,
Hmm.
I've just been like dumbfounded by the fact that like I don't know any of these plants around me, you know, like any of the trees. I know, oh, that's a pine tree or that's a this, but like
Right.
what are they all? What can I use these things for? I have a close friend who has been doing a lot of like wild food forest stuff and
Hmm.
just asking him like little questions like, well, what's around here that's edible? And just like learning like, oh, now I see mullein everywhere,
Yeah.
and just all these different things. It's like, I don't know, it just kind of blows my mind that we all are so disconnected from it. So it's pretty interesting that you've kind of like fully immersed yourself
Yeah.
in that kind of stuff. What you said just recently that things feel like they're kind of coming together and they felt like they're like separate things. Like, how would you describe what those separate things are that felt disconnected, and how do you feel they've started to integrate?
That's a that's a great question. Well, just to quickly go back to your point, also like naming
Mm,
things like, oh yeah, that's mullein, that's
mm,
white pine. It's like when you start to learn the names of these plants, you actually feel more like you're in a place.
yeah.
Like you're not in the woods, you're suddenly in a community of different beings and you have a much deeper relationship to the place you're in. And I could imagine that with that kind of intimacy and knowledge, you can create you just become a more empathetic kind of person. You have more of a multi-sensorial relationship to your sense of space.
Mm,
But in terms of like, yeah, putting things together, I mean, I guess now I like to, and I think this will evolve as I grow up and I get older, but I really like to work as a bridge between traditional indigenous wisdom and Western science. Because I've found that often the things that these traditional cultures are articulating through stories about fairies and ghosts and demons actually have some sort of validity and truth from a scientific perspective. It's all about language and the way that we see things and
mhm,
articulate things. So, like the big example I like to use is with tobacco. Specifically, like in the Peruvian Amazon, there's a different variety of tobacco they use called Nicotiana rustica, which is like a stronger tobacco. And so the community, like the Shipibo community there, they'll plant tobacco around their house, and they'll say, "We're keeping this tobacco here to keep the spirits away," right? But what tobacco very practically does from like a material or a scientific perspective is that it keeps insects away. It's a pesticide, it's an
mm,
insecticide. So, oftentimes these kind of spiritual intimations and articulations of how plants work also have some sort of a scientific application. It's just about being able to bridge those perspectives and arrive to that third perspective.
yeah.
And I think today, as people are, at least people of my generation, our generation, are increasingly kind of hungry for like meaningful relationship to nature, we need to be speaking about it in a way that makes sense from our culture in our language and that we can translate to our families and friends without sounding like total cuckoos,
You're right. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because we've put our like sense of belief in the authority of scientific language and scientists and observational measurable data and all of these things where it seems like the indigenous way is just a more intuitive understanding that probably comes through experience, I would imagine, and an inner
Right.
knowing. So yeah, the language might sound kind of silly, but it's like, why would they develop these complex understandings of all this stuff if it didn't have something grounded in reality that had a
Totally.
function, you know.
Totally, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and that just brings us closer to those more abstract realms of knowledge and actually brings like truth and beauty to them. And I think that we as our culture can actually like really benefit from them. So
Hmm.
I mean, for my path, like, the different parts that I've been putting together, I came from a background, I think I'd say at first I was really woo-woo. Like when I
Mm.
was 18, 19, 20, or even just a teenager, I was super into the woo. And I feel like in a reverse order, I often meet like ex CEOs that turned really woo
Oh.
woo. I kind of went the other way. I found that I started off in a very ephemeral spiritual realm, and I actually wanted to ground and validate like feelings in science and in data and in practical like things.
Yeah, yeah,
And then some things have to fall away because they don't hold, and then other things actually still have some truth and stay. So,
yeah.
yeah.
I feel a similar trajectory, not in terms of science, because I'm definitely woo in a very like creative type of mind
We
that
love woo, to be
like
clear.
I dabble in science and I respect it, but like it's just not where my mind is. But like I've found myself living so much in a world of creativity and imagination and creating that like this whole thing, um I guess like when so I used to work regular jobs, and over the past like handful of years I've been really dedicating myself to music and working
Mhm.
like freelance music related things, and that sort of pushed me to this breaking point of like isolation,
Mhm.
pre-pandemic quarantine, just of working alone all the time on a computer. And it kind of
You're a
broke me
pro now.
down. Yeah, kind of broke me down to this realization of like, shit, like I want to do something that's actually connected to living, like not
Mhm.
abstract work on a computer. Like I want to like grow something, forage for food or hunt, fish, like anything that's just like real life things, that we
So do
just
you feel like there's a difference between real life and computer life?
I don't not in reality, I don't think there is. I mean, it's all obviously like
Right.
contained in this experience, but like physically it feels different for me, like
Hmm.
for my nervous system, and
Right.
it just feels different. And when I do something physical and I'm touching the ground and feeling the dirt and like not just earning little digital points to go to a store and give them to somebody to acquire a prepackaged thing. I'm like going out into the woods and finding fiddlehead ferns or whatever, for
Right.
example. And
Right. Yeah.
yeah, just wanting to almost like pushing so hard to try to get to some next level, and
Hmm.
you meet this threshold that makes you kind of go back and work on the foundation of your house before you can build up the second level or whatever,
Mm. Interesting.
if that
Yeah.
makes sense at all.
Yeah, life seems to work in a pendulum in many ways. Like you go to this side only to kind of tick back to the other side
Yeah.
sometimes. And you're like, oh, I gotta go back over here now.
That's why I sometimes have a weird sympathetic understanding for people uh like what do they call it? Like middle of the road politics. I forget what the term for it is.
Centrism?
So yeah,
Yeah.
because it's like I understand the idea of trying to like, well, let's not swing too far this way because we're just gonna have to swing back the other way. Like let's try to
Right.
find a way to get to the middle.
Like a middle path. So
Yeah.
steady. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, there's like in a way I think in just generally in our culture, I find that my parents and just let's say our parents' generation have been the harbingers of technology and sort of advocating for an urban lifestyle and all these kinds of things. And yet so many people I know are like retaliating against that and are
Mm,
kind of going into this neo uh, pastoral kind of like we're going to go into the forest again, have
mm-hmm.
babies and berries or whatever.
Yeah.
And it really is interesting how we kind of go back and forth. And interesting, I mean, with technology itself, like realize that these things are tools and they've kind of overtaken us and our will and our consciousness in
Yeah.
many ways. And I'm really curious to see how like younger generations navigate that territory, and if they're going to really like radically delete their accounts, or if they're going to go for a more Luddite approach or
Yeah.
not, if they can escape the grips of the dopamine
Yeah.
pinging effects.
Well, that's one of the things I've kind of felt like might be occurring in some way is that like we've been rushing towards something, some sort of undefined goal of just trying to make the best, fastest, newest, like most complex technology possible. But we're doing it seemingly from some sort of like unconscious place where we don't know why we're doing it or what we're trying to
Right.
achieve. And so it's almost like life wants to reset us, bring us back to like really getting in touch with like, where's this coming from? Why are we doing this? And like, we can use this stuff for probably much more beneficial purposes that can like, help to actually connect people and enrich life rather than try to just get people addicted to technology and buy things. So it's almost like it almost feels like life has thresholds that will prevent you from not say that we can't destroy ourselves, but you know what I mean? There's almost inbuilt protective mechanisms that are like, no, before you can create a free energy device, you have to go back to the basics and sort of like work through this unconscious material that is causing you to express this stuff in ways that are like maladaptive. Does that make sense?
Kind of, yeah. I'm like, I'm almost there.
I don't know if I described that real well, but
Maybe just go a little bit deeper. I'm like
yeah.
almost with you, but I'm missing just like the punch.
So I feel like we have this like wounding
Mhm.
as a collective, like a culture. We have a lot of emotional wounds, and a lot of what we're creating and manifesting is like coming from these emotional wounds and almost trying to like we want the faster technology not because we're trying to create a better connection so we can grow better food and do this. We're doing it because we're trying to like compensate for emotional trauma and
Right.
feel like, oh, this will make me feel better if I have the new iPhone. And so it's
Mhm.
almost like just by doing that, we're building up our own crisis, like we're setting the stage for an initiatory crisis that will force us to work through that trauma so that then we can create these things from a healed place and we can actually use them for our own benefit rather than our own
Right.
destruction, if that makes
Right.
sense.
And the question is, do we need to confront our trauma in order for that to happen? And if so, how does that happen?
Right.
You
Well, it
know,
seems like this isolation is
it's a
one
good
way that
start.
helps people start to get a little
It's a good
taste.
start. Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. I just wrote an article for it's called copy.net,
I
and it's about I don't know if you've read it. It's like about
did, yeah.
social isolation.
Yeah.
And and I keep thinking about it. It's really true how just cross-culturally, especially in the Amazon basin, we find isolation is architected into the fabric of their culture, because people understand that it's vitally important to have time to really be devastatingly, painfully alone,
Hmm.
and let those things emerge. And it doesn't take a psychotherapist, it doesn't take a psychedelic medicine, just the technology of isolation and silence itself already will allow things to start coming up. So I've often imagined a world where we were quarantining and then like internet connectivity totally, cut out. Can you imagine the next level
Mm.
of depth that this whole thing would be taking? I mean, just obviously not from the technological things like orders being fulfilled and USPS going where it needs to go, but just in terms of us being able to like reach out to our friends and scroll or whatever we're doing, it would be very different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably much more devastating on the whole without any distractions. I think
Hmm.
probably people who um, are having a hard time now would be much harder. I would have to imagine.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So
But yeah.
you've done, have you participated in quite a few of the isolation?
Yeah, I have
Uh,
in different forms and traditions. Yeah, yeah. I mean, even honestly, even just be like the first times that I went to the Amazon basin, I was in the Ecuadorian Amazon. Um, and it's a community, it's a community called the Sequoia. And they, at the time, I guess it was, geez, it was like almost 10 years ago now. They were, while there was still a lot of westernization in the region and this kind of urban influence, it was still very simple lifestyle. And for me, I think the first major aha moment that I had there was recognizing how intense it was for me to just sit still and focus on one task. Like sometimes I would just be sitting with the ladies and we would be skinning an animal or something, or
mhm.
washing the dishes or whatever task it would be. And just seeing, like, first of all, one thing is also the squat, like sitting down in the squatting position and seeing how we're such a chair culture that
Mm,
my body just like wasn't able to do that. And just the pain I would feel in my body from doing it and the pain I would feel from just like staying in one position and focusing on something um, is already to me like a great indicator of how movie and squirmish and kind of
yeah,
distracted we are as a culture. And who's to say that one or the other is better too, right? Because again, different cultures have different strengths and different weaknesses. But I
yeah.
I find that at least, if one thing I do recognize is that if there is one thing I think Western civilization needs to change, it's our sense of place and connection to land, and like you said, naming the fiddlehead or naming the pine or whatever it is. And it's like it is kind of in these quiet places that we actually feel the need or the desire to connect on that level.
Hmm.
um so maybe we still will be crazy and texting
Hmm.
and chatting, snapchatting or whatever, but I there must be some sort of a synthesis there that
Yeah.
can emerge from that. Yeah.
So why do you think we are so squirmy and
Well, I mean,
and
maybe like you mentioned, like we're avoiding something.
yeah.
And who knows, maybe there's some sort of a genetic memory. Maybe it's something about our physiology. Maybe, I
Mm,
mean, I think there are probably many factors, many of which we'll never be aware of and we'll never see in the light of day. But I know that humans are storytelling creatures and we make meaning, right? That's what we
hmm.
do. We create a meaning out of the abstract to make sense of it. That's like what's so unique about humanity.
Yep.
And I think that we have been captivated by a very compelling myth of development and this idea that we need to escape from
Mm,
wilderness because we are other than wilderness.
hmm.
And I think that that story has been programmed into everything we do, every technology we purchase, every pitch we make, every interaction we have almost. And
Mm,
I think that there's just the current, the kind of riptide that's pulling us through our jitteriness and our hyperactivity, and in turn creates these epidemic illnesses we see, like depression and anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder and eating disorders and all of these different things which we do not see in slower moving cultures. We just don't see them,
yep.
and that's, to me, that's a pretty compelling indicator that there's something structurally about the stories that we tell about our lives and what life is about that healthy,
Yeah.
isn't healthy for anyone, not
Hmm.
only our human community, but our broader community for
Mm,
sure.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting how um there's all sorts of like technologies out there, speaking of more like farming technologies like regenerative agriculture, that
Uh,
seems to be the answer to so many of our biggest problems that we have if it was implemented on like a mass scale. But yet all of these people with giant amount of resources. Maybe not all these people. I don't want to make it sound ridiculous here, but like Elon Musk is trying to spend so much
All
money
these people.
talking about going to Mars, or like I'm sure there are plenty of people on the bandwagon of wanting to like get off the planet or
Yeah.
create carbon sucking machines or whatever it is. Part of this is being inspired by listening to Charles Eisenstein's climate book, but
Mm.
it's just this sort of idea of like all of this man-made technology to try to save problems that were created by man-made technology.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, are there a bunch of other people like you that are, do you know from like the things that you do, are there an army of Sophias like trying to merge indigenous knowledge and
Oh my
Western?
goodness.
Because that like, I'm definitely not a throw the baby out with the bathwater kind of person. Like, I still want to have a computer, and I love
Yeah.
making music on my computer, and
Yeah. I love
and
shampoo. Like there's some
yeah, there's
basic.
so many cool things. But it seems like there is a way that we can merge it, just like what you're talking about with the understanding of these more abstract concepts like spirits and all of that, but also merge like the living styles. Um,
Mm.
so are there an army of Sophias or?
As far as I know, there aren't specific Sophias, but I do know that. I mean, I think everybody brings a bit of their own flavor and their own story into it. So, in that respect, I've met many people who are bridges,
Mm,
people who are with one foot in either world and represent that. And that's even people who, like who come from intercultural backgrounds or have an ethnic diversity or religious diversity or really any kind of like diversity. And I mean, I myself am like not, my diversity is in where I work, but in my blood, I'm not representing like many different nations.
hmm
But I guess in terms of bridge work, I mean, my sense is that honestly, anybody can be like a bridge because, like you and I were discussing earlier, you have a background in wanting to be an avid fisher, and then being a music producer, and like
hmm
you can marry those two worlds together somehow. The
Yeah.
challenge is just in understanding where those connections exist, and I think that that's what our world needs right now. Like I'm amazed by the education system, and at least the US is a bit more diverse in this, but in places like Brazil, for example, you need to already apply for college knowing what you're going to study.
Mm.
And most people, they just have a couple of choices, really. So just to think that like at the tender age of 18, you're already being kind of funneled into one discipline. And of course, that's going to create a homogenous society and civilization. So, yeah, I mean, but in terms of really, really bridging indigenous wisdom and scientific knowledge, I actually don't know many folks. But that's also because a lot of people who are doing this work kind of in the shadows.
Mm.
They might be in academia and their amazing papers are blocked behind paywalls, and unfortunately, not that many people are going to read them. So, not only is it like the thought, but it's the content and the medium that you choose to share these messages that's so kind of important today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems kind of like and maybe you could speak to this a little bit in terms of like what the book is about, because I know you wrote a book called When Plants Dream, and is that kind of about the spread of ayahuasca in? Because
It is,
I
yeah.
was gonna say, I mean, like in some ways I answered or asked that question like, you know, not facetiously, but in a way that I'm like, I kind of know that it's happening in general, because people like you, not necessarily doing exactly what you do, but my own,
Hmm.
like you said, my own desires to reconnect with nature and,
Yeah.
like it's happening all around. And I really feel that. And the spread of
Mhm.
ayahuasca and it being such a prevalent thing in our consciousness seems to be pretty obviously a sign that we're, kind of craving indigenous wisdom and other ways to like connect with ourselves. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, maybe you could speak to that and just kind of how your book talks a bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on. I never wanted to write a book about ayahuasca. I thought I actually it was probably like the most terrifying idea for me. But I had written my undergrad thesis was about working with the sequoia actually and drinking
Mm,
ayahuasca I was using a kind of methodology that's not terribly popular today in anthropology. It is, which is basically it's like a personal ethnography. So you are essentially studying and reporting on yourself as it is in the field. So it isn't this kind of cold and distant anthropological authoritative, I'm describing how this tribe is or whatever, because obviously we can only explain things as we see them.
that's how it
Um,
used to be, though, right?
yes,
And it was
absolutely.
frowned upon to
Totally.
like take
Yeah.
part in
Yeah.
activities.
Yeah, and exactly. Yeah. I mean, and also like anthropology itself has its roots in colonialism and in sort of this idea of bring extracting information from other cultures without their
Mm,
permission and kind of using it to dominate over the cultures. And actually, there are even oil companies who hire anthropologists in order to better know the motivations and inspirations of the territories of the people that they're trying to kind of conquer. So you can see how it could be a kind of double-edged sword.
yeah, I wish that was surprising, but
Yeah, and
unfortunately
you,
it's not.
oof, you would you the tricks that these people use to get that oil is like pretty incredible. Yeah, I've seen it too. It's like unbelievable. But in any case, yeah. So I guess so. In order to avoid that, there's this kind of new field of personal ethnography, where you're basically studying yourself and reporting your experience of being in a particular place. So in my case, it was being in the northeastern Ecuadorian Amazon as a young, like it was a late teen, kind of feeling like total freaking weird loser with bug bites and like moving around all the time and super hungry and feeling lost and scared and just like telling it as it is. And that in and of itself is actually pretty compelling because you're really you're articulating the differences between different cultures, and I think that that's really what's quite interesting. Um, and so when Plants Dream is kind of like a 3.0 version of that, which basically tells the story of the global spread of ayahuasca using stories from what I call first generation drinkers. So people such as myself who don't have a cultural or ancestral history using these substances or these plants or adhering to the indigenous beliefs and values and traditions and rituals that the plants are used or embedded in. And yeah, so it's very fascinating actually. I think to me the biggest takeaway of the book is really just seeing how plants and plant medicine more broadly has in many cases had the ability to entirely transform someone's outlook on life itself.
Mm,
Like, yeah, like there's a great meme I found the other day. You know the one where like there's the woman walking and there's the
yes.
girl and the guy. Yeah, that one. I don't know if there's like a name for that one, but one of them, so the first girlfriend is like atheism, and then and then the guy is looking at DMT.
Mm-hmm.
So like basically saying how like you know many of us potentially were en route to being hardcore atheists, believing that there's no purpose to anything and that there's no intelligent design in anything. And then
Mm-hmm.
we have experiences with DMT or DMT containing plants. And then suddenly we're like, whoa, like nothing is what I thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Yeah,
pretty cool. That's pretty awesome, I think.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that meme cracks me up big time because
Yeah.
I never really got to the whole like down the atheist road in general. Like, but I was never religious either. I kind of grew up Lutheran Christian, but I didn't really care about it, didn't really think too much about it. Always felt like there was something mystical about life, but never really knew how to describe it or but yeah, DMT definitely gives you a real I don't know what. I'll just stop there, but
A real something. That's
whatever
for
it
sure.
gives you makes that meme super funny. I'll say that.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. Yeah, and it's, I think the other thing that's so interesting about it too is like not only that the phenomenon of Western people drinking ayahuasca and taking DMT, like not only that, but that in our times with like climate emergency on the horizon and
Hmm.
coronavirus and like all of these different moments, it seems vital that now more than ever, with extinction on many planes, extinction of stories, of languages, of plants and animals in our midst, like I think we fundamentally need to reconsider what life is and what we are. And
Hmm.
the stories that our mainstream culture are telling us are just not compelling enough to invoke that stoke that fire in us that we need to be earth stewards and to care for our land and for our communities and reinvent the way that we do things and rebel against these systems, that say
Hmm.
you should do X, Y, and Z when it's just not gonna work anymore.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, I
yeah.
think it's becoming harder and harder to buy in, to the kind of the standard path of doing things. Um, and I see that with, I have friends who have kids and um, just watching young kids grow up and trying to imagine them taking the predetermined kind of path of going to college, starting a family, buying a house, trying to get the best career they can get or whatever. It just seems like it's hard to believe that that'll even continue to the next round of humans. I mean, it just seems like it's falling apart, and as it probably should. Like I don't know, it just kind of
Mhm.
blows my mind when I think about we're all talking about um obviously there are differing opinions on is what the real true story is with climate change, what exactly is going to happen, what's causing it, all of this stuff. But I think it's pretty undeniable that things are, whether it's the weather climate, the political climate, the social climate,
Yeah.
the economy, whatever, pick your thing, like it's all unstable and it's all not functioning harmoniously or correctly.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we're all just kind of going about things as usual. I mean, not right now, but we kind of were until this.
Yeah.
But it's like the amount of resources we have and the amount of human uh, ingenuity and just like time, like the amount of people we have that we could put to work on projects. And put to work sounds not quite right because I don't think some central institution needs to put us all to work. But
Good point.
if we were all inspired to start taking action towards these things, like um, it seems like we could pretty rapidly change a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, the funny thing, I guess, the thing with humans is that often we need incentive to act like and if there's no clear purpose, then yeah, you're going to want to keep your cushy job and yeah, you're going to want to continue to do things as
Hmm.
they were, but it's usually like a breakthrough moment, an ego death or a traumatic event or something that compels people to actually change, and dip into the wild unknown, which is like a very scary and potentially stupid thing to do, but
Yeah.
I think now, I mean, my sense is that this is like, I mean, this being like coronavirus quarantine is and everything is kind of step one in a series of things that are going to unfold in the next years.
Yeah.
And I think more and more people are going to be faced with incentives to change, seeing that, oh shit, my food supply is precarious. My relationship cannot survive if I'm alone in a small apartment with one person raising one kid, or, it depends. But I think we're going to start seeing what is eternal and works and what isn't and what doesn't work. Even for myself, like I noticed that I was living a super mobile lifestyle, and I always lived with this kind of oxymoron or this hypocrisy really of like calling myself an environmentalist, but flying to conferences and working in the Amazon and flying twice a year in and out, and just like having and being in this quarantine and seeing that has really kind of brought me to like between a rock, what do you call it, a rock and a hard place. Like I
Yep.
can't
Yeah.
really, I ca- it just, it's not a hypocrisy that I can live with too much longer in the same way. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's tough because you kind of had to do a certain amount of that to, learn all this stuff and be able to have a certain
Totally.
perspective and, be a part of spreading a certain message. And,
Hmm.
because I feel the same way in certain ways. Like, I mean, I haven't been flying a bunch, but I've lived in the city and I live about an hour south of this country town where I grew up, and I've
But
driven
even
back and
driving a lot.
yeah, I've driven back and forth countless times to just like
Yeah.
connect with friends and do certain things in nature. And but it's like, yeah, it's there's a it's like we can look back and pick apart these certain things, but it seems like there's a maturation process, like the fruit doesn't fall off of the tree until it's ripe, and
Yeah, good point. Good
uh,
point. Yeah. Although interestingly, also like fruits, if you want to keep going with the plant analogy, it's like like fruits, all of the fruits kind of become ripe at the same time, which is kind of interesting because they don't really have any reason to do that. If you have one really really ripe fruit in a bowl, it'll turn all of the other fruits really ripe. And there's actually a gas called ethylene, and this gas sends a message for everybody else to get ripe, and that's because the fruits know, the plants know that if they're all attractive and sweet and tasty at the same time, then they have more of a chance of collectively gathering the attention of all of the animals and pollinators around them. So it could just be like one apple, but it's more likely that, so they realize that they're stronger
that's
in
super
numbers,
cool.
which
That's
is, I think,
very
is cool.
interesting. Yeah,
So
it
maybe
is.
we could emit our gases and be like, we'll be
Yeah.
stronger together.
Well, I feel like that's what everybody's trying to do with like podcasts and stuff, really, and
Right.
in art and different things. Like,
Yeah.
I think we all feel this. And I think what I learned firsthand from starting a podcast and thinking that I wanted to like share a message was like I kind of got slapped in the face in some ways, like, and it was just totally broke me down. And I realized, like, oh no, I'm not trying to share a message. Like, I need to learn some stuff. Like, or I just had to go.
Mm,
It wasn't all about the podcast, but the start of the podcast somehow coincided with like a deep journey to my inner emotional
mm.
world. But in the same way, just that process in and of itself um, seems to spread that, I forget what you called it, but emit that gas,
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
um,
Yeah,
so
totally.
I'm curious though about like, so, hearing you speak about fruit like that, and I know do you do some type of permaculture in the Amazon? Is it just working with like growing actual ayahuasca type stuff, or are you growing all sorts of
Mm.
different things, food and everything?
Yeah, growing lots of different kinds of things. I mean, basically, where I've been based for the past year and change has been the Temple of the Way of Light, which is a retreat center in the Peruvian Amazon. And all of the profits from the temple go to a sister nonprofit called the Chaikuni Institute. So my work is basically to bridge the temple and the Chaikuni Institute.
Mm,
So we have a couple of really cool projects. One of them is inviting guests that come to the temple, this ayahuasca retreat center, and actually have an opportunity to plant medicinal and teacher plants. So that way they feel not only are they having that like personal, spiritual relationship with the plant, but they're having a physical relationship to it. And in this gesture sort of supports this idea that we are giving what we take. And this is sacred reciprocity. And this is a principle that's fundamental throughout many different indigenous nations around the world. If you look at the Inuit people, if they kill a seal, there's like you need to put a drop of cold water in its mouth as an act of reconciliation, in order to ensure that there would be a bountiful population in the future. So there are all of these like through these taboos and traditions and hunting and gathering rituals, communities have a certain set of rituals that they enact in order to make sure that they are maintaining the cosmo-ecological order to keep things harmonious. And that's something that we have totally forgotten in our culture, like big time. And so that's a bit of what I like to do and what I've been doing there. And there, yeah, we have like a tropical permaculture program. So, guests come and we walk them around. And the main thing that I do is do like plant walks also. So this is this plant and this is, it serves this purpose. So many people see the cacao plant, the plant that makes chocolate for the first time in their lives, or the coffee plant, or these sorts of things. So yeah, it's like education and inspiration. And in addition to that, at the Chaikuni Institute, in addition to planting ayahuasca too, which is a huge thing, a huge program that we have, we also are developing something called Chakras Integrales. I think there's a fly attacking me.
There is.
Did you see him? He's like my little halo.
He's hanging out. Yeah.
Blessed. So yeah, we have Chakras Integrales, which are basically these holistic, very biodiverse plots of land that have many, many different varieties of plants in one area. And the idea that we're proposing there is basically that, the having very, very biodiverse plots of lands that farmers can use instead of the monocultured land. So in the jungle, one of the main issues we have is monoculture agriculture. So planting, cutting everything down, burning it, and then planting yucca or planting some kind of staple crop, doing that a few times, and then the land is dead, dry, totally unusable, and then they move on to the next piece. Yeah. And they need to do that because it's more economically sort of viable. Or they think it's more economically viable. And in some cases, it does have a shorter, the return on investment is high at the beginning, but it diminishes over time. So that's the background. And then, yeah, to wrap it up, the Chakra Integral program is all about supporting an idea that really, really biodiverse, lush forests, fruit forests can also be just as economically viable for communities. And so we've been implementing that already and had like super success. And it's been really cool to see that in action.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was just having a conversation with my friend yesterday. There's tons of farms around where I live, because I'm in the Midwest. And just seeing
corn?
Mostly corn, some soybeans, but yeah, primarily corn. But just driving around and seeing these massive fields of just pale, dry dirt exposed to the sun and to the wind. It's just now knowing what I know about regenerative agriculture and no-till farming and biodiversity and all this stuff. It's just like heartbreaking and like
it's
just
like,
sort of like, what are we doing? Like I can just picture these fields of just like food sanctuaries of, with the livestock right in with the fruit trees and the all the different plants and stuff. And I mean, I'm sure that if we're going to survive, that's coming, that's coming.
Yeah,
that's
it has to.
It's going to be the future. But yeah, just like, it makes you, I mean, I don't farm, so I have it's like, I'm not doing it. And I'm sure there's something in my life that I could be doing that's the equivalent of a farmer, taking on regenerative principles. And so I'm not in any way saying that I'm, got something figured out that they don't. But I will say that when you start to learn about it, it makes you want to just go up to people's doors and start knocking and hand out pamphlets. Like,
Yeah.
have you heard of regenerative agriculture?
Yeah.
But I was going to ask you a question, and forgive me because you probably, well, I don't see how you could, well, maybe you would have a good answer, or maybe it's just a ridiculous question. I don't know. But given your sort of bridging and, kind of trying to understand from a Western perspective what some of these traditions are doing. So, like, I totally get the tobacco thing with the pests, and I'm sure there are plenty of other examples like that. But so, like, killing a seal and putting a drop of water in its mouth, like, that seems
Yeah.
much more symbolic than actually having like a
Right.
concrete principle that's doing something. I
Right.
personally am still open to the idea that there's something going on, but would you have any type of opinion on what that would be?
On what, like
Like
the
what
symbolic reciprocity is, or?
no, like if you were to try to translate that into a Western perspective of like
I see.
what's the purpose? Like, is there a function, to
Yeah.
putting a drop of water in a dead seal's
Yeah.
mouth or whatever?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I won't say, I won't pretend to know what in their worldview that actually means, because perhaps there is a whole like dynamic story and
Mhm.
actual like material reality that I just don't understand. But I mean, if I get your question, I guess it's like how those kinds of things would translate into our lived and daily experiences. I mean, I think for me, the practice that I've started developing was actually simply reading a book of, they're called Earth Prayers, and they're
Mhm.
these like beautiful intercultural sonnets and haikus and poems and prose and verses from different cultures that are all celebrating the earth in some way. So it could be, it's actually a book. It's called Earth Prayer by Elizabeth Roberts and Elias Amidon, I believe.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, just like going out into the woods or in a field or wherever or on a rock, and having a time to sit there and read that, for me has been a kind of ritual of acknowledgement that makes sense for me. Um, there's also a very kind of common practice that we see in like, I mean, I actually don't know where this originates from, but offering tobacco to different plants. So if you are going to take some matter from a tree, you offer some tobacco at the foot of that tree as a gesture of gratitude. And maybe it doesn't have to be tobacco. There are people in the Sierra Nevada mountains in Colombia. There are I don't remember if it's 4 or 5 nations that live up there. But they have a system called ofrenda, like pagamento, payment. And they'll just use little bundles of spun cotton or rocks, or traditionally they would use gold. And really, at any point that they would take something, they would enact the gesture of giving something back. And it really is, it's maybe not so much, I mean, the technology may not so much be in like, the value of the cotton so much as the value of the intention, and taking a moment out of your day and connecting that action to the what you're doing, and being present with that action. And that already is like tremendous, and I think can really shift the way that we just are aware of accounting, like
Yeah.
what we're taking and what we're giving. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like in the simplest, like non woo woo kind of way, it could just be we're seeing in those cultures that they understand that there is a give and take to nature, and you can't just, or you can, but they
Not for long.
understand, yeah, they understand the consequences maybe of like, pulling up every single ramp that you find in the woods,
Yeah. Yeah,
and what happens
exactly.
then.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so I think that's our generation's work. And I think that with quarantine, maybe we have a little bit more time and less pressure and nowhere else to go, really.
Yeah.
At least for those of us who aren't like, working right now, to exercise that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to see where it's available, where it's possible, and then to notice if it makes a difference. And if not, then you don't use it, like these things need to be tested and tried to see if they're valuable for you and if it's true for you. But I suspect that it would have it would shift somebody's approach to just like how they see themselves in the ecology of things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it kind of makes sense. I mean, if we were doing the same thing with humans, most of us would, like if a friend borrowed us money, we would want to pay them back, or if a loved one gave us money, we would want to do something to
Sure.
show our
Yeah.
gratitude. And so it's like, why with the earth and with plants do we just totally negate that principle and just think like, oh, you're just here for me to take whatever I want and I don't have to
Yeah.
do anything for you, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, that's an awesome point. I never thought about it quite like that. But exactly, like when you owe somebody money, there's something that doesn't feel right, or like you kind of can't really sleep well at night and you feel like there's something that needs to be resolved. So yeah, you nailed it. That's totally
But
it. Yeah.
I kind of get in the way of like we're so deep, like we've gone so far. It's almost like it's hard to know like, well, how do we come back from that, to
Yeah.
where um
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
it's not coming back. It's only coming forward.
true. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. There
Because
is
that's
no
an
going
interesting
back.
thing. There is no going back.
Right.
Totally. Yeah. And I think often, especially when people talk about like, for example, like ayahuasca and the psychedelic renaissance or these things, there's some sort of a notion that we're returning to some sort of a place. But I don't think that's true at all. I think that we'll always have our hyper materialistic, rational, creation-y kind of
Yeah.
frenetic minds that are beautiful and have made beautiful things. And we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, like you
Yeah.
said. So how do we marry those two worlds together moving forward? Yeah.
I tend to imagine it like not that we're returning to something, but that we're kind of revisiting a theme at like a different
Yeah.
octave.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. That's
I
awesome. Yeah.
probably because I'm into music, think
I
of it in
I
terms
love
of
it. Yeah.
vibrations and octaves. But um,
Yeah.
so what do you have like, if anything? I personally don't have a ton of grand visions for my future. I'm kind of in a weird no man's land, no man's land spot of kind of just exploring and trying to figure out what's next. But do you have any type of, I know you talked about knowing that you don't want to be doing a ton of flying for the long-term future.
Unnecessary
So like
thing.
what would
Yeah.
you do? Is there a part of you that wants to just go and live in the Amazon for the rest of your days, or do you feel more inclined to stay more around here and do you have plans of things you'd like to do
Yeah.
in the States or
This is a loaded question. I usually don't feel so awkward answering it.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, I mean, I love it. I live for it. I mean, I guess I'm actually exploring a children's book right now. I'm going to be writing a children's book kind of soon, which will be for, the inner child in us
I've
and
always
also,
wanted to do that.
yeah, yeah.
That's so
Make it
cool.
happen, man. We got
Yeah.
time. Yeah. Um, so I do feel at this point that there has been in my life a lot of exploring outside, exploring other cultures, exploring other places, exploring other ecosystems, and I'm really feeling that with quarantine and all of these things, a message that I'm receiving is to connect to a place and to connect to people, um, and really make that meaningful. And even if it doesn't feel as cool and exotic and awesome, it's like that's where the work is to be done. And so I think that that's where I'm going to be. But having said that, I mean, long term, my greatest vision has been really creating a program called AYNI. AYNI, which is marrying together the sort of emerging psychedelic industry together with projects that give back to the earth. understanding that as we are reforming psychedelics and our notions of healthcare and the pharmaceutical industry and these things, I think that we can no longer approach health as an individualized matter, but it's really a question of also the health of our ecosystems and our communities and all of these things. Because as we see, when one of us is not well, the rest of us don't get well. And coronavirus very, poetically illustrates that for us. And so, yeah, the vision is to have, all these people, these industries that will be making profit and will be making money, actually committing to supporting regenerative initiatives, not only in the Amazon basin, but, run by tribal and forest peoples around the world.
It sounds awesome.
Yeah. So, but there's so much moving right now that I guess that these things must happen in their right time too. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell me more about the children's book idea?
Sure. Yeah.
And also,
I won't spill all the beans, but
no, for sure. But you brought up the inner child, so it also can be for adults in some way.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So what makes you feel drawn to the inner child concept, and what are your experiences with the inner child concept? This is something I'm very interested in.
It's funny. I wasn't even, as I was saying inner child, I was like, is that appropriate for this? But I guess it can, because I myself, it's like also a new term in my vocabulary.
Okay.
I understand more than I think when I personally talk about the inner child, it points to things that are lost, but they're remembered. Like you remember that you lost, like the golden watch or the toothbrush or the things in our kind of Pandora's box that you still maybe even feel pain or react to or longing in your daily life, but you're not quite sure what it is that was fractured or hurt or lost at that time. So you could look, I think there's like a very psychoanalytical perspective where you could point to a specific event that was traumatic that shaped then the story that you created about yourself and about the world, and then maybe it manifests in certain behaviors and patterns. Like, for example, if you're a kid and your pants get pulled down in the playground or something, and it's like you feel the mortification of humiliation, maybe as a reaction to that, you become the clown, you become the jokester, you become the person who's always going to make fun of themselves first so they can't be hurt by others. And like these are the kind of patterns that I think about when I think about inner child. So I don't know if it refers to the book so much, but
no, that's awesome.
what are your musings on the inner child?
Well, I was sort of forced into a state of just having to confront all sorts of inner children over the past year or so, and it's an ongoing process. But a lot of it was I don't know if it was brought about by, or I got lucky enough to be exposed to right around the same time, internal family systems therapy. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Never heard of it. No.
I think you would probably dig it from the, by the sounds of it. I definitely would suggest checking it out. The guy who kind of put it together, I think he would kind of say he discovered it more than created it, because he discovered it with clients. His name's Dr. Richard Schwartz, and he's just a brilliant guy, and it's just listening to him is like therapeutic. But yeah, it's just the concept that we have these vulnerable parts of us that were hurt, and it could be in tiny ways that might seem totally insignificant to an adult, like we just didn't get the right attention that we needed, or weren't able to express ourselves in the full way that we felt like we needed to. And then we just those vulnerable parts get what he calls exiled, and so or lost, as you would say, and then we form protective parts of our personality around them. As you said, like the class clown would be a protector, and it's protecting that person from feeling the pain of that exile. And then if our protectors don't work and our exiles get hurt, then we have firefighters, which would be like our last line of defense. So like binge drinking. Oh, I
love that. The firefighters.
But the thing about it is, that's really beautiful about it. Well, for one, he says every single pathology fits into this model, and so that it's totally non-pathologizing. And he has worked with murderers and pedophiles and everything, and he says it all comes down to these principles, and that all of these parts, all the different parts of us, none of them are bad. Like they're all just trying to do their best to help us. And he sort of projects the model from not only the individual self and the internal world, but obviously to the exterior world and to groups of people, and functioning as different exiles and protectors. And it's really fascinating model. And but yeah, so my experience with that is confronting the pain of those exiles can be so intense, because it really feels exactly how it did when it happened. You know, like if you were alone in a crib crying, that was one of the things that came up for me. Like when you re-experience it, it really feels like you might die, you know, like you're totally abandoned, and you could be in fear of your life. And so it kind of makes sense to me, and it gives me a lot of compassion for why people do what they do, because all they're really trying to do is keep themselves protected from this like intense amount of pain, really, you know?
Yeah, totally. Sounds great. I would love to read that. It sounds really good.
Yeah, you should check it out. I do a little bit of work. I had Richard Schwartz on my podcast, and I stayed pretty
Great.
connected to some of their stuff. So yeah, you'll have to check it out. But then I sort of derailed us from. I just would love to hear a little bit about your children's book, if you.
Yeah, I'll give you like a brief preview. I mean, basically, it's a book about ethnobotany, which is it's an interdisciplinary field. The book is rather rooted in the concept of ethnobotany, which is very, very simply the study of how people use plants, or how plants use people, the relationship between plants and people. And so it's a book about a little girl who takes a journey around the world and has conversations with these plants who are being forgotten, and the plants whose names are being forgotten, and whose medicines and gifts and songs are being forgotten. And so she learns messages from the plants, and they tell her about the different names that the traditional people would give to them, the different ways that they would be used, where they would like to grow, and how they hope that she will remember them and carry them on because they love the people.
That's super cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
So, are you drawing pictures for it too, or what?
I'm not illustrating it.
Okay.
No, I'm not illustrating. No, that is a task too monumental for me. I will not do that. Yeah.
No, that sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, shit.
Well, you'll see it.
Yeah. I don't know. How can people sign up for your newsletter if they're interested in
my stuffs.
staying connected with you?
Yeah, the best way to find, I guess, all of my things would just be through my website. So Sophia Rokhlin, ROKHLIN.com. And there you'll have a little pop-up that says Root Shoots and Bloomers, and you can sign up for my newsletter. And that's pretty cool. I keep it pretty lit with like cool activist opportunities and blog posts. I'm usually writing about, different rituals and recipes and stories about different plants and people. And then I'll be doing a book club pretty soon, and just like general updates. So that's the best place to stay in touch. Yeah.
Sweet. Is there an audiobook version of your book?
There is. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. One
sweet.
Plant's Dream. You can find. I think you can find
it on
the best
Audible?
way. You can find it on Audible.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Who
Yeah.
is Daniel Pinchbeck, did he write on that as well, or
He was
did you
co-author.
co-author
Yeah.
it with him?
Mhm.
Did one of you guys narrate it, or somebody else?
I wish. No.
Oh.
Neither of us narrated it.
I
No.
always love when the authors narrate.
Me
I found.
too. Yeah. No, it was not either of us, but what can you do?
You just narrated it in unison,
Yeah, right at the
both
same
of
time.
you. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's totally what happened on ayahuasca.
Well, anything else interesting that you want to share with anybody who might listen to this podcast,
Anything else interesting? Gosh,
or
it's
not
no
interesting?
pressure. Gosh.
It could be not interesting, it could be entertaining or uh, embarrassing.
Interesting or embarrassing? No.
Okay.
I mean, I've learned that, yeah, for transplanting orchids, you
Mm,
need to, if you're preparing them in like bark, if you have a bark kind of mixture for them, orchids are they're called epiphytes, plants that grow from trees, so they need to have a lot of aeration and air. So you need to basically like they're very, very picky, so you need to boil the bark before you transplant the plant to disinfect it.
dang.
So that's my hot take on life for the audience to walk away with.
Anybody out there getting an orchid, take notes.
Yeah.
So I just got to ask you one more question then, because I'm curious with that tip. Like, as a person doing the type of things that you've been doing, have you been learning a lot about actually growing plants? Do you do a lot of the planting and tending to plants?
Mm.
Yeah.
It depends. I would say not that much.
Yeah.
Actually, not that much. I think I work more on the coordination side of a lot of these projects. So that's in fundraising and communication. And sometimes I will like, help put things in the dirt.
Mhm.
But in terms of having a long-term knowledgeable relationship with plants, actually not that much. And I think
Mm.
that that's because that requires you to be in a place, to be
Yeah.
rooted somewhere and to look out for these creatures and to have a relationship with them. So I have, but I have one rose bush that lives in the Amazon,
Mm.
who's like my buddy, but I don't know how he's doing. So these kinds of things, in order
Yeah.
they're like kids, they're kids and teachers. So
So is that something you're interested in doing if you become more rooted around
big
this
time.
region? Yeah.
Yeah, for
Cool.
sure. Watch out, world. I'm gonna take
I
all
feel
the
like you
plants.
probably got quite a leg up since you study them. That must help in some way to kind of.
It does. I mean, the thing to note is that it does and it doesn't, because I mean, knowledge is one thing, but wisdom is another
Mm,
thing. And you can know how often to water something, but the wisdom of like feeling when a plant is thirsty is
mhm.
another kind of level. So I'm looking forward to getting wiser.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
with you on that. That's what I'm going
Yeah.
for too.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, it was fun talking to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. That was great. Loved it.
Yeah, sweet. Glad.